What if I told you the classic American muscle cars you worship are actually the boring ones? That the true monsters of Detroit were hidden away because they were too dangerous, too ugly, or just too purely insane for the general public? Today, we are exposing 10 bizarre, mutated freaks of the V8 era that completely broke the rules and terrified the automotive industry. If you do not stick around to see the illegal aerodynamic weapon waiting at number 10, you cannot call yourself a real gearhead. Smash that subscribe button right now and let's uncover the history they tried to erase. Starting off our list at number 1 is the 1971 Pontiac GTO. At first glance, you might think there is nothing bizarre about a GTO, but look much closer. This was the exact moment the golden era of muscle cars began to bleed out. The federal government and insurance companies became the ultimate common enemy, forcing Pontiac to drastically drop their engine compression ratios. To compensate for the neutered horsepower, Pontiac's designers went completely rogue on the visual aesthetics to maintain its intimidating street presence. They slapped on a massive protruding wire mesh grille that looked like a heavy-duty industrial meat grater. They paired this with twin scoops carved so deep into the hood that they looked like the flared nostrils of a starving beast. It was a desperate, aggressive cry for help from a dying era. Driving the 1971 GTO, weighing in at nearly 3,600 pounds, felt like wrestling a heavily armored but deeply wounded gladiator fighting for its very life. The engine still possessed that raw, guttural Pontiac rumble, but the sheer visual violence of that front end was something entirely new and unsettling. It was heavy, broad, and unapologetically brutal in every way. It stood as a final middle finger to the incoming emission laws, proving that even if they could not give you 400 horsepower anymore, they could absolutely still sell you a car that looked like it wanted to devour the vehicle in front of it. But if you think a drastic facelift is weird, wait until you see what happens when you mix a European gentleman's lounge with raw American tire shredding power. At number 2, we have the ghost of the muscle car world, the 1968 Mercury Cougar X R7G. This was not just a car, it was a bizarre identity crisis on 4 wheels. The letter G stood for Dan Gurney, the legendary road racer, and Mercury wanted a vehicle that felt like an Aston Martin but punched like Detroit iron. They packed this machine with bizarre luxury features you never saw on a dusty drag strip. It came with a Power Factory sunroof, imported European Lucas fog lamps, and heavy-duty hood pins that looked like they belonged on a Le Mans prototype racing car. Inside the cabin, you were swimming in rich leather upholstery and real wood grain panels, gripping a custom console while a massive 390 cubic-inch V8 engine eagerly waited to snap your neck back with extreme torque. It was an incredibly strange combination of tuxedo-level refinement and bar brawl aggression that confused absolutely everybody. Because it was so confusing to the average buyer back then, it sold in shockingly low numbers. It was priced too high for the hardcore drag racers and styled too aggressively for the wealthy country club members. Today, finding a real XR7G is just like hunting a mythical unicorn, making it a highly coveted, ultra-expensive ghost of American automotive history. Speaking of unicorns, our next car completely flips the script. What if I told you the deadliest car on the streets looked exactly like something your grandmother would drive to the grocery store? Number 3 is the ultimate sleeper, the 1962 Plymouth Savoy Superstock. If you parked this 3,200-pound brick next to a sleek Ferrari at a red light, the Ferrari owner would definitely laugh. It featured the most boring, boxy, utilitarian body style Plymouth had to offer. There were absolutely no flashy racing stripes, no massive spoilers, and no aggressive badges. It was just a plain, uninspiring sedan. But underneath that incredibly dull exterior lurked a mechanized, fire-breathing demon. Chrysler engineers quietly dropped in the legendary Max Wedge 413 cubic-inch V8 engine. It featured highly tuned dual 4-barrel carburetors and a wicked cross-ram intake manifold that aggressively stretched across the engine bay, looking exactly like a pair of terrifying mechanical spider legs. To make this sleeper even crazier, the engineers completely stripped out all the heavy sound deadening, forcefully removed the heater, and stamped the front fenders and hood out of ultra-thin, lightweight aluminum. If you leaned too hard on the fender, you would instantly dent it. When the light turned green, this boring grocery getter would violently twist its chassis, lift the front tires completely off the pavement, and absolutely humiliate anything in its path on the quarter-mile track. While the Savoy hid its bizarre nature tightly under the hood, our next car put its sheer weirdness right out in the open, and it confused absolutely everybody. Rolling in at number 4 is the 1965 AMC Rambler Marlin. Let's talk about that highly controversial design. AMC desperately wanted to compete with the incredibly popular Ford Mustang, but instead of creating a sleek, lightweight pony car, they took a large, sensible family sedan and fundamentally changed its shape. They forcefully grafted a gigantic, sweeping fastback roofline onto the heavy chassis. The final result looked exactly like a giant mechanical fish swimming awkwardly down the interstate highway. The massive roof tapered down to a strange semi-oval rear window that gave the heavy car a dragging, disproportionate appearance in the back. Back in 1965, American dealerships simply could not give these bizarre machines away. They sat on dealer lots collecting dust for months because the proportions were so incredibly alien to buyers. It was technically designed as a luxury cruiser equipped with an available V8 engine, but it completely failed to figure out who its target audience was meant to be. Here is the crazy reality about price anchoring. Back then, it was widely considered a cheap, ugly, and heavy corporate failure. Today, because of its sheer oddity and rarity, passionate classic car collectors are happily paying premium auction dollars just to own this bizarre, aquatic-looking slice of American automotive history. If you firmly thought the Marlin was an odd mix of styling cues, I need you to brace yourself. Our next heavy machine tried to combine brutal muscle car violence with refined European sports car technology, and the result was pure madness. At number 5, we proudly introduce the 1973 Pontiac Grand Am. Before I explain this 2-ton car, I have a challenge for the top 1% of gearheads. Do you know what space-age material Pontiac used for this specific nose? Pause the video for 3 seconds and drop your answer in the comments right now. Alright, the correct answer is Enduraplastic. Pontiac brilliantly designed this massive, sharply pointed aerodynamic nose cone out of a flexible, rubber-like compound that could literally bounce back into its original shape if you hit it with a heavy hammer. It was absolute engineering sorcery for 1973, but that flexible face was certainly not all that made this heavy beast incredibly strange to look at. The Grand Am featured bizarre, louvered rear quarter windows that instantly made it look like a high-speed military submarine gliding down the street. Inside, they paired genuine African crossfire mahogany wood on the dashboard with a massive 455 cubic-inch V8 engine. It was essentially a heavyweight brawler wearing a highly tailored Italian suit. Sadly, it was launched exactly when the devastating oil crisis hit, effectively murdering this heavy, beautiful freak before it could reach its maximum potential. But what explicitly happens when you take the terrifying front end of a muscle car and weld it directly onto the back of a utility pickup truck? You get the complete insanity of car number 6. Number 6 is the wildly confusing 1970 Ford Ranchero GT. This machine is the automotive equivalent of a terrible mullet, serious business in the front, and an absolute chaotic party in the back. Ford took the highly aggressive, menacing front clip of the heavy Torino GT. They included the legendary shaker hood scoop, a piece of metal that physically violently vibrated as the massive engine idled, and grafted it seamlessly onto a functional pickup truck bed. Imagine looking nervously in your rearview mirror and seeing the terrifying wide-stanced grille of a 429 cubic-inch Cobra Jet muscle car rapidly bearing down on you. Then you watch it blow right past you at 90 miles per hour while hauling a full load of construction lumber in the back. It was a completely brain-breaking contradiction of engineering. You possess the raw, smoke-producing torque meant exclusively for the drag strip, but with absolutely no weight over the rear tires because it was an empty lightweight truck bed. The ultimate result? The 4,000-pound Ranchero GT was the most chaotic, wildly tail-heavy, tire-destroying burnout machine of the 1970s. It made absolutely zero logical sense for daily driving, which is exactly why true gearheads absolutely love it today. If you truly want to see what happens when a racing legend takes a popular Mustang and redesigns it with pure aviation madness, you need to see our next contender. Roaring heavily into number 7 is the 1969 Shelby GT500. The brilliant Carroll Shelby took the standard factory Mustang and heavily stretched the front end with custom-molded fiberglass. He created a massive, elongated snout that literally looked like it was trying to aggressively inhale the horizon. But the real, undeniable showstopper was the advanced airflow management on the hood. Instead of using simple, traditional scoops, the hood featured exactly 3 separate NACA ducts ripped straight from advanced aerospace engineering blueprints. These were masterfully paired with 2 fully functional heat extractors. It looked far less like a traditional passenger car and much more like a stealth fighter jet rapidly preparing for a highly aggressive, high-speed takeoff right there on the open public highway. Underneath that lightweight fiberglass hood was the earth-shattering 428 cubic-inch Cobra Jet V8 engine. And if the front did not thoroughly intimidate you, the rear surely would. Shelby forcefully moved the heavy dual exhaust pipes to the dead center of the rear valance. This highly unusual placement gave it a custom exotic look that screamed raw performance. It was considerably wider, longer, heavier, and far more theatrical than any production Mustang that had ever come before it. Yet, as incredibly wild as the Shelby was, it looks completely tame compared to the heavily exaggerated, almost cartoonish proportions of the muscular car waiting at number 8. Number 8 brings us to the surprisingly aggressive 1973 AMC Javelin AMX. While other manufacturers were terrified of insurance companies and desperately making their cars look weaker, AMC went the completely opposite direction. They built a heavy car that looked like it was heavily mutated on performance steroids. The most defining and shocking feature of this bizarre 3,300-pound beast was its massively exaggerated front fender bulges. They dramatically swooped up and heavily over the front wheels exactly like the heavily arched back of an angry territorial wildcat. It looked utterly absurd and unnatural on the normal street, but there was an absolute genius aerodynamic reason for it. Those massively flared fenders allowed AMC engineers to securely fit incredibly massive racing tires underneath. This specific modification directly helped them absolutely dominate the highly competitive Trans Am racing series at high speeds. But the sheer weirdness did not politely stop on the outside of the vehicle. If you ordered the highly exclusive option package, you received an interior directly designed by French fashion icon Pierre Cardin. It featured wild psychedelic plum, orange, and white stripes running across the seats. It was a brutal Trans Am race car completely hiding the interior of a high-end disco club. Now take a deep breath. We are rapidly entering the terrifying realm of the heavy aerodynamic titans. The final 2 vehicles on this list are so incredibly extreme, they permanently altered the entire course of racing history. At number 9, we have the legendary 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona. The enemy here was not the federal government. The relentless enemy was the wind resistance. Dodge was losing badly in NASCAR, so their top aerospace engineers completely ignored traditional automotive design rules. They violently bolted an 18-inch aerodynamic steel nose cone directly to the flat front of a standard Charger. It made the 4,000-pound vehicle so incredibly long you could practically land a small helicopter on the hood. Then they bolted a massive 2-foot-tall stabilizing aluminum wing to the rear trunk. When this incredibly strange car finally hit the public dealership lots, the general public absolutely hated it. It was completely impossible to easily parallel park in normal city spaces. The gigantic rear wing looked entirely ridiculous to the average everyday buyer, and dealerships literally had to forcefully tear the expensive nose cones off just to sell them at a massive loss. It was an initial commercial disaster, but out on the track, it forcefully became the first car in history to completely shatter the 200 miles per hour barrier. Those visually ugly cars that sat rotting on dealer lots back in 1969 are now selling at auction for millions. But if the heavy Daytona dramatically broke the speed barrier, our final car entirely broke the entire motorsport. Behold the ultimate, undeniably bizarre American muscle car. At number 10, we have the undisputed king of automotive absurdity, the 1970 Plymouth Superbird. If the Daytona was considered a radical aerodynamic experiment, the Superbird was the highly refined, heavy weapon of mass destruction. Plymouth desperately needed to lure racing legend Richard Petty back to their team to win races, so they heavily took the aerodynamic madness of the Daytona and significantly amplified it. The steel nose cone was smoothed out perfectly, the pop-up headlights were integrated completely seamlessly, and that towering rear wing was specifically angled back even further to catch maximum downforce. When heavily equipped with the legendary 426 cubic inch Hemi engine, this 4,000-pound car was an absolute terrifying track monster, capable of doing easily over 200 miles per hour. Imagine nervously standing right next to this neon-colored spaceship, feeling the physical ground violently shake from the massive V8 engine, staring directly up at an aluminum wing that is literally taller than the actual roof of the car. It was so incredibly fast, so consistently dominant, and so completely unfair that NASCAR officials heavily panicked. They immediately rewrote the entire rulebook just to aggressively ban these aero cars from competing ever again. They created a car so bizarrely perfect it broke the law. The golden age of American muscle was pure engineering madness we will never witness again. Detroit engineers were lunatics building bizarre monsters fueled by intoxicating horsepower. From invisible sleepers to massive aerodynamic spaceships, they completely shattered the rulebook. Now I need to hear from you. Which of these 10 freaks belongs in your personal garage? Drop your choice in the comments right now. Smash that subscribe button for more high-octane automotive history, and I will see you in the next video.